It's time to go beyond the headlines, cause I don't put in overtime just so I can headline, okay. Now it's Fox Sports, I'm live with Renee. Going hard every day, sports rapping every play. Different segments for your favorites, coming at you daily. With positive vibes, yeah, we some game changers. Basketball, football, soccer, with different interviews, you never know who may pop up. Listen, only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines with Renee Washington.
Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines with Renee Washington. We have a very special guest. We have a former New York Giants defensive lineman joining the show, Stacey Dillard. Stacey, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm happy to have you here. Even though you are a former New York Giants player and I'm an Eagles fan, I can take off my fan hat. And as a reporter, I'm just happy to have you here. I'm curious to know about your experiences in the league and even in college. Let's get started back when you were playing with the Oklahoma Sooners.
Okay.
Being part of a big football program, you know, it's something that not everyone has the chance to experience, even if you play college athletics like I did, because being at a big school in a big conference in one of the major sports, being a football player, you know, it's different than someone like myself that played soccer at a mid-conference school. So talk to us about your experiences being a part of the Sooners and how that prepared you for that next step.
Excuse me. Well, you know, being in Texas, the Oklahoma and Texas rivalry is huge. And, you know, having to make a decision to go out of state to go to Oklahoma was a huge decision. But I knew early on in my high school career that I wanted to go to a university that when I said the name, they knew it meant football. And I thought Oklahoma was one of those programs. Um, you know, being a kid from a small rural town, my first visit was to Florida State, and I had visits set up to Florida State, Penn State, and UCLA. So I was going way away from Texas. And I took my first visit to Florida State and came back and canceled all my out-of-state visits to Penn State and UCLA, and knew that I only wanted to go 3 hours away from home. So it came down to Oklahoma and Texas, and that's kind of how I ended up at Oklahoma. But I had a great recruiting coach there, Lucius Selman, one of the Selman brothers, that convinced me to come to Oklahoma, and I never regretted it.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it definitely paid off. I mean, that's a program that sets you up to be able to make that next step in your career.
Oh, definitely. You know, at the time, Oklahoma was getting all the top defensive linemen out of Texas, and I was one of the top defensive linemen, and I think we had the previous top 5 defensive linemen out of Texas. So I thought it'd be a great place for me to go and play D-line and help me get to the next level.
Yes. Now the combine had just passed, and you've had the opportunity to go through that transition period from college to the NFL. You know, what's that experience like when you are just finishing up your college career and you're looking to get a part of any program in the NFL, just hoping your name gets called, and you're now transitioning, going through workouts, the combine, things like that?
I'll tell you what, at the time, I really didn't think it was a big deal just going from, because I was always an athletic person, so I thought it was just me going and just displaying my skills. But when you get to the combines, there's so much stress for you to be at your top. It can be overwhelming at times. I think going into the combines, I think you know how the projections, Mel Kiper and all those come out. They had me projected like the 28th pick to the Buffalo Bills. And I was projected to run like a 4.8, 40. And when I got to the combines, it's just the intensity of that place. I ended up running a 5 flat, which obviously is a big difference than 4.8. And then when I got ready to do the bench press, I had been doing it probably about 25 to 28 times, the 125. And the adrenaline was flowing so fast when I got to the combines. I think I did 225 like 16 times, which was not very good. So that rating from 28th pick ended up 153 in the 6th round. So, I think going to the combines affected me a lot. Later on when the Giants came to Norman to work out, I ended up running a 4.84 for him and benching 225 about 25 times. So I did what I should have done at the combines. So it just
Right.
a lot to get prepared for that.
Yeah, and that's something that, we hear about the NFL Combine. We see what's going on, more, of course, now with all the coverage around it between social media and everything else. But none of us really understand what it's like to be a young athlete that's making that, that's on the field, that's doing the different tests. What you talk about the pressure, what was really the hardest part for you in that period of, there's a lot of pressure. It's exciting. It's overwhelming. I'm sure there's a lot of emotions that you're feeling at that time when you're just, I don't know how old, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, and you're
Right.
trying to, show that you deserve a spot on a team so that you can continue your football career in the NFL.
I think the pressure mounts more when you get there, just because you probably at this time has been one of the best athletes in your program. And when you go to the combines, they put you in there with 25 guys that can do almost the same thing you can do. And I think that it ends up putting a lot of pressure on you to try to elevate above those guys, and the nerves and the tension just gets you out of rhythm. Um, Once I got back to Norman, where back in my environment, I was able to relax and do what I normally do. Uh, I think nowadays these guys prepare a lot more for the combines than we did back then. Uh, when I was at Oklahoma, I just worked out with my strength coach. Now I believe they go all over the country and get these guys that train them for 3 or 4 months before the combines to just get them prepared for the combine. So I think that's the big difference that guys are doing now that we didn't really do back then, that I think would have helped me out a lot if had I had that same training.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It gives you exposure to, other types of trainers, other types of guys. You do see a lot of players that start working out with older players, former players, different types of coaches. That allows you to just have different voices and perspectives that are helping you out versus just working with, as you mentioned, your strength coach. So
Right.
you get that call, your name gets called in the draft, you're going to the Giants, a long way from Texas, but being a part of the NFL, and that's a goal that you set out to do once you got started playing football, and here you were hearing your name called. What was that moment like for you as you realized, okay, I made it, but I'm not done yet?
Right.
I made it, but I
Well,
got a lot more work to do.
it's funny because I originally going in thinking back then when I got drafted, we had 12 rounds, and I really thought I was going to be a day one draft pick, which was probably 1 through 5 at the time, I believe. And I had my family there, in Norman, and thinking that I was going to get drafted, go through the first 5 rounds, no one calls. My agent calls and tells me, "Hey, Houston Oilers love you, say they're gonna pick you up first thing in the morning." So obviously I wasn't, I was a little let down because I didn't get drafted day one. So, but I was excited because I'm from Texas and thinking I'm gonna be with the Houston Oilers. So I'm eating breakfast and watching the draft, and all of a sudden the phone rings, and I'm obviously think it's the Houston Oilers, and it's the New York Giants. The Giants had to pick before Houston Oilers, so they ended up picking me 153, and I ended up going to New York. And being a country kid from Texas, I'm like, golly, where the heck is New York? And me and my wife at the time is getting on the map trying to find out. And we was like, oh God, we're going to New York. And even then, I didn't even realize the New York Giants were in New Jersey. So, when they flew me
Yeah.
in, I'm flying into New Jersey, and I'm like, why am I going to New Jersey? And so it was an exciting time. I don't think I really realized that. Well, I knew I was in the NFL, but the moment that it really hit me was, I believe, when we came back on Thanksgiving Day and we played at Texas Stadium, and Lawrence Taylor told me on stunt. And I think at that moment I was like, wow, I'm in the NFL, and that's kind of when it really dawned on me, growing up watching the great Lawrence Taylor and Carl Banks and Pepper Johnson, playing and watching them play the Cowboys at Texas Stadium. And now I'm sitting here playing with these guys at Texas Stadium. And I think that's really when it dawned on me that I'm really in the NFL.
Yeah. And that, you know what, that is a perfect segue into my next question, because, you see across professional sports, guys like yourself that were going through high school and college, watching someone, maybe they're starting out in their career. So now when you do get to the league, they're still there, and they're now the veterans, but you watched them, you were a fan of theirs, and now you're playing alongside them or against them, whatever it may be. For you, what was that moment where that you talk about when Lawrence Taylor was standing beside you and you were realizing, wow, I'm playing with Lawrence Taylor? Where else was that moment when you were like, you know what, this is what everything I've worked for led me to this. This is where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. That's the real feeling that you had in the league.
Oh, definitely. Like I said, when you grow up in Texas, you're usually a huge Cowboy fan, and just watching those guys play the Giants, and you pretty much know all the Giants because you see them playing the Cowboys twice a year, and then obviously you see some guys from like Everson Wall that was a Cowboy, and then he ended up at the Giants, and seeing Phil Simms, just intermingling with those guys was one of the most amazing feelings that you could ever have. Just knowing that you grew up watching these guys play in the Super Bowl, and now you're right alongside of them. I was really fortunate that had some great leaders with the Giants, Pepper Johnson, Phil Simms, William Roberts, that really took me in and made me feel like a part of the team. When I got there, those guys were just coming off a Super Bowl, and seeing those guys with the Super Bowl rings and seeing all those things was really a dream come true.
Yeah, I can, first of all, congratulations on that. That is incredible. I mean, you were looking over your career, going back from being a high school All-American and playing at a top college program in Oklahoma to be able to make it and play in the NFL is incredible, and something that, a lot of people aspire to do, but not everybody can set out to do. So what is your advice to someone that is, going through the process, whether they're just getting started out, and it doesn't have to just be football, but just getting started out at the youth level, or they're in high school or college trying to make that transition, something you learned later on in your career, maybe after you were drafted in 92, that you wish you knew leading up to that?
Well, I think if I could give a kid any advice about trying to get to this level, um, I don't think kids nowadays want to put in the amount of work that it takes to get to this level. And they see it and think that this is something, but because of social media, they always see guys going D1, getting drafted, going to the pros, and it's something that they think that anyone can do. And there's only a small percentage of guys that ever make it to this level. And being in high school athletic director now, uh, I don't see the commitment that it takes to get to this level. And I try to tell my kids, even if you are committed, even if you're willing to put in the work, there's still a problem with genetics that you have to get to this level too. And I was a guy that was fortunate that I was big, strong, and fast, that could do things that most people my size couldn't do. And a lot of that starts from obviously the mom and the mom and dad, and not every kid has those genetic genes that it takes to get to that level. So even if you're willing to do all the work, it still takes a little bit more to get to that next level. And I just think kids are not willing to put in the work to even get close to being at that level. Um, And the other thing that I would tell kids is have a backup plan, because
Mm-hmm.
when you go into this profession, this is something that's 3, 4, 5 years, and you have the rest of your life. And I know these guys are making a lot of money, but everybody doesn't make the Patrick Mahomes or that type of money. A lot of those guys are making the league minimum, which is still a lot of money, but it's not the kind of money that's going to make you last the next 40 or 50 years. Um, and I see a lot of guys coming out that don't have a degree or don't have a backup plan. This NFL was their plan, and once that's
Mm-hmm.
over, they have no direction. So, I would tell kids to be willing to work and put in the time, not only on the field, but in the classroom, and prepare yourself for life after football, because it's going to come.
Yeah. And I think that's a great message, because I do think, especially with social media, it almost perpetuates it more, makes it worse, because all you see is the glam. You don't see all the work that goes into it all the time, And that's something that not every kid understands is, okay, you might see maybe one workout, someone might post a workout video, but there's so much more than that. There's so much more blood, sweat, tears, frustrating days, injuries, things that go into it. And you were part of the Giants during a time where, as you mentioned, coming off of a Super Bowl, then there was, coaching changes and team changes, and they were in a kind of like a rebuild mode. So even once you made it to the NFL, your career wasn't all the glam and the fun that everyone would assume you have just because you're in the NFL. So now, handling that adversity, and as you talk about having a backup plan, now you are an AD at a high school in Texas. What was that? What preparation did you put in, or maybe lack of preparation did you put in, as you were in your career, once you saw, okay, things are not going as expected? Now what's next for me?
Well, I just a little bit about the end of the career. I think people, you mentioned about the fun and the glam that they have, and I think that's what all people see. I think when I played in the NFL, I tell people it was almost the least amount of fun I had playing, because it became a job, and the pressure for you to be successful day in and day out was huge, because it's not like any other job you have. You think about when you go to work today, and every mistake that you make is recorded, and if you make too many mistakes, they bring in someone else to apply for your job. Most of the time, people can make mistakes throughout the day, and they can fix those mistakes before the end of the day, and nobody will ever know. But when you play in the NFL, everything is recorded and everything is evaluated on a day-to-day basis. So it becomes a very stressful job, and obviously you like the glamour and stuff that comes with it, but there's also a lot of stress for you to perform at a high level every day that you don't necessarily have in an everyday job. So that being said, when it was time for me when my time was up with the Giants, and I was at the Eagles for about 4 games too, in the preseason. So I know you're an Eagle fan, so I got a little
There
bit
we go.
So I came back to Texas and didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I kind of took a year off to kind of figure that out, and I became a director in a mentor program in Collin County, right here in McKinney, Texas. And basically what I did was work with kids that had committed felonies in high school. And I took them on as a caseload, as a mentor and a probation officer, and tried to expose them to different things in the area, and just be a mentor, a role model, father figure for them. I did that for about 4 years. And I guess that was long enough to get my itch back for sports. So a guy came along, offered me a position at a little small school, White Wright, Texas, and to get back into coaching. And that's what I did. And I ended up coaching at White Wright, and and then we won some games and went to Sanger. Then I went back to my hometown in Clarksville, and was a coach there for a couple of years, and eventually moved back to McKinney and opened up McKinney Boyd High School. And then we actually had a great season. We lost to RG3 in the playoffs, which was a great experience. And then that end of that year, they offered me the head coaching job at Princeton, Texas. And I think I used to think that my true calling was to be a football player. And after going through the whole process, it made me realize that, God really let me play football to give me a voice for kids. And those 4 years that I had with the Giants gave me the credibility to go out and talk to kids and have an impact on kids' lives and have an impact in the community. And I really think that was my biggest calling. It wasn't necessarily football. He just gave me that as a platform to reach out to the youth in this area. So I was a head coach for 5 years, and I've been the athletic director for the last 6 years over boys and girls, and had the ability to coach my kids and coach a lot of other kids and get them through and think to have a big impact on some of these kids' lives.
Wow. I love that, because you took us through, just kind of the behind the scenes, what we don't see. You lived it, and talking about how tough it was once you were in the league, and knowing that at any moment your job could be pulled from you, essentially, which we don't deal with in a corporate America. You don't always have that same pressure, as well as, realizing that football was almost just a way for you to help, as you talk about, build the platform to be able to accomplish your true purpose, which is something I feel like honestly is the same for me with soccer. When I was playing soccer, it really helped me to develop that credibility to do what I do today. And that's the same thing you're talking about. So I love that, because a lot of times you do get so caught up on, especially as an athlete, like, this is what I'm supposed to do the rest of my life. I'm going to be this professional player. I'm going to travel all over the world, do, A, B, and C, but it might not be that is your end career purpose. You might have more to do. So that is incredible.
Kind of what I've been doing a lot of is now, obviously, as an athletic director, it gives me a lot of avenues to reach back to younger players. I've had a lot of ex-players. I've had a lot of ex-Sooners to come through my program right now. The former head coach of Oklahoma, John Blake, is my D-line coach at Princeton High School. So being able to get someone with that name in my program, I have Desmond Lewis, who used to be a receiver at the Buffalo Bills. Being able to mentor a lot of those young players that are leaving the NFL and trying to show them the same, give them some of the directions that I was given coming out and stuff. And you're right. That's a big transition from the NFL to what am I going to do next?
Right.
And it's a lot. I will say now that the NFL has a lot more programs in place to help direct players. When I came out, when it was over, and see you later. And you were left to try to figure out what was next. And, fortunately, I had a strong foundation and a good group, network group that kind of gave me some direction and helped me through. These younger players now I believe they're much better prepared for life after the NFL, but it's still a struggle because you're going from someone that is in the limelight and famous, and all of a sudden you have to fit you back into the real world. And that sometimes is a struggle for a lot of people. A lot of people still want to hear the crowds, and once the crowd goes away, it's hard to fill that void for them.
Well, I'm so happy that you were able to join the show, Stacey, because you did bring a lot of great perspective and insight from your experiences that a lot of people don't realize or don't always understand as much as you do once you're in it. So where can our listeners follow you on social media and you know, the work that you're doing in coaching and everything else?
Well, one of the things that I'm on Twitter a lot now. I'm on, I believe it's, wow, I believe it's Stacey Dillard 71. Uh, Stacey Dillard 71. So you can tell.
Yep, there you go.
You could
You're
tell
right.
that I'm trying to get caught up on this social media stuff. I also work with Executive Global Tours. I do a lot of celebrity tours for players and try to help promote their charities and stuff to raise money for their charities and stuff. Got a big trip coming up with Deuce McAllister and Gary Reason and a lot of other guys from the Giants and stuff. So um, that's kind of where I'm at, just trying to give back to the community and give back to society as much as I can.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining the show this week. It's been a pleasure having you on to hear about your experiences with Oklahoma, playing with the Sooners, with the Giants, and life after. So it's been a pleasure having you here.
All right. Thanks for having me on.